Hello, everybody. My name is Jake Howell from Hood College, and this is for a project for the Capstone Proseminar in the computer science major. So what we're going to be diving into today is a computational analysis between Python and C++. All right, so the study of which, which programming language is superior really depends on the problem. As a lot of people know, in the machine learning, deep learning kind of subset of artificial intelligence and of computer science, Python is most commonly used due to its superior packages that can be imported and its simplistic um, structure and syntax and nature. And likewise, object-oriented programming is more commonly associated with C++ and Java and that kind of stuff. So what language works more effectively to enumerate primes? That's what we're going to focus on here today. Is the program is going to ask a user to input a number, and the program is going to be able to output every single prime number up to that number that was inputted. And so we are going to evaluate this with the C++ and Python programming languages and to see which one is superior. And there's no official list of classifications for what is superior and what is not. That's really up to the user. And so what I'm going to do is evaluate the programs for runtime. And so the inputs I'm going to use is going to be consistent for both. And I'm going to use 100, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, 150,000, and finally 250,000. And I'm going to compare the runtime that C++ outputs and that Python outputs. And so I did my analysis, and these are the C++ results. As you can see, I did 10 trials of each of the inputs, and these are the results. As we can see, obviously it increases as it goes. That makes sense. And it looks like as the outputs or as the inputs start to increase, it looks like the outputs don't increase linearly, which kind of surprised me at first before I went into my analysis. I expected 10,000 to be basically twice that of 5,000. I had no real knowledge to base off of that, but it's just kind of what I was expecting. So that was a surprise to me. And then I went on to Python, and the Python results actually really surprised me. In reading up on my literature between the different programming languages, everything I read returned that Python was consistently slower than C++ in almost every application. And the only real positive of using Python was for the packages that could be imported for like PyTorch or TensorFlow and that kind of stuff for machine learning and more specifically deep learning. So this definitely surprised me that they return times so significantly different, especially when you get up into bigger numbers than C++ did. So as we can see between the two, if we just look at 250,000, this last, see if I can get my pen going here. Just this last one right here, trial one, it's 250,000 for Python returned 11.8 seconds about, whereas C++ returned 124 seconds. And that really took me by surprise based off what I thought I had known to be, fact from what I was reading. And so that really surprised me between the two. And so the next slide, I'll see that I took the means of all the trials. I just took the mean of all the trials and I put that in one side-by-side table to show the difference. And we can see that in the first two inputs, where's my mouse? Where is it? Oh, here we go. As we can see in the first two inputs, the times are in favor of C. Actually, I'm sorry, just the first input is in favor of C. And 1000, it's close, but it is in favor of Python. And then from there, the differences start to grow increasingly by a wide margin in favor of Python being more efficient in terms of runtime. And just to show that in a graphical display, we can see that Python increases linearly. Python is the blue line. We can see that they start off pretty similarly over here from this wide scale. It's hard to tell how close they are together due to the scale. But as we can see, the margin grows very rapidly, and to the point where we can conclude that the C++ runtime increases exponentially as the inputs increase linearly, whereas the Python runtimes will increase linearly versus exponentially. And that really surprised me. If anything, I would have thought that they would be flipped and Python would take longer. I read that Python had like kind of unofficial loops, and they didn't run loops the same way that we're used to with Java and C++. And I'm not too familiar with that, but I really did think that Python would be the slower of the two. And so to get the results that I did was surprising, but not unwelcome. And just to show a different graphical display, I included a log scale just to normalize the data a little bit. And it does show the same thing that the previous graph shows. Shows that up until around this 300 right here, C++ will work quicker than Python will. But once we hit that 300-ish kind of mark right here, then it's all Python from there on out, and C++ will be the less efficient language. And so as for the conclusion, I've pretty much summed it up. C++ starts off being more efficient, and then Python takes it and runs with it from there. As for what I want to do in the future, I found this very interesting, especially since it contradicted what I read out from what is published out there. So I definitely like to continue with my analysis and try to shore up some errors that I'm sure are there. And I listed a few. Is how does the compilation method affect runtime? I think maybe trying a few different compilation methods. For C++, I used just the Sublime text editor and compiled it through the Windows command line. Whereas with Python, I compiled it and ran it through JupyterLab. So I'm relatively unfamiliar with the compilation process, but maybe that affects it. That's something I definitely want to look into in the future. And then one part I wanted to look into for this one, but due to time management, I decided to just focus on runtime. I want to see how the RAM is affected by the different languages, because even if Python is more efficient in terms of runtime, if it takes up a lot more RAM, is there do you pick and choose? If you are prioritizing memory over runtime, maybe you choose C++. If it does have less of a memory implication, that's the next step that I would love to get into. And the last point is, what other languages besides C++ may beat Python in terms of runtime efficiency? I would love to look into Java. I saw some things out there with Go, some PHP, JavaScript, and I would just love to look into some other programming languages and see what their efficiency ramifications are, and see how they compare to what I've learned about C++ and Python. And that's going to be it for my methods and analysis. And thank you, everybody, for listening.